We are Group 7 and we did our presentation on food insecurities and hunger. There are many factors that play into food insecurity, but there is no clear solution, nor is there a clear problem that causes hunger and food insecurity. Food insecurity is complex in that undernutrition and recurring hunger can be achieved through enough or too much energy intake of nutrient-lacking foods. Consequently, this overconsumption of energy eventually leads to obesity, which is more prevalent in developed countries. In fact, the highest rates of obesity are found among groups in developed countries and those who have the lowest levels of education and income. As money availability drops, energy-dense foods that are nutrition deficient become the best way to provide daily calories at an affordable cost. Fast food has a high intake of energy, i.e., saturated fat, sodium, and carbonated soft drinks. But fast food also has a low intake of vitamins A and C, milks, and fruits and vegetables. Unfortunately, this trend of obesity in developed countries is growing exponentially. More than 1 billion people around the world are overweight. It is for this reason that fast food is linked to food insecurity. A nutrition-deficient population and increasing obesity rates are common factors for food insecurity. In developing countries and refugee camps, malnutrition is a huge concern. Refugee camps can range in size from 6,000 in Sudan to over 100,000 in the Dadaab camp in Kenya. Due to their size and location, farming is not a practical use of their time. Instead, the refugees have to rely on food rations given to them by relief programs such as World Food Program or nonprofit organizations such as Food for the Hungry. But these food rations are not enough. If given a complete ration, each meal would consist of around 700 calories with roughly 26 grams of protein. While this may seem good enough, refugees usually sell or trade their rations for other amenities such as cigarettes or blankets. With vaccines and healthcare being one of their top priorities rather than food, it is inevitable for malnutrition to invade the camps. On top of the horrible conditions that these people have to live with, the crime rates in refugee camps are unimaginable. At times, the crime rate can be so high that the refugees will beg the law enforcement to take them back to their war-torn country because they believe it will be safer. One disaster that we can all understand better was the Hurricane Katrina. When this hurricane struck Louisiana in 2005, hundreds of people were left homeless. In an effort to shelter those in need, the government set up a makeshift refugee camp in the Superdome. However, the survivors of Hurricane Katrina were not considered refugees because they were seeking shelter in their own country. Because of this law, the United Nations couldn't help the survivors with health care or food rations. But the similarities between refugee camps and Hurricane Katrina Superdome are astonishing. The Superdome was overpacked with outnumbered and armed law enforcement. The survivors were given rations by nonprofit organizations, but this wasn't enough. The survivors of Katrina were hungry and angry about the little food they were getting and often resulted into violence, just like the refugee camps. Food insecurity is a major problem throughout the world. As shown by this hunger map, you can see that the more red the section, the more poverty-stricken each country is. As you can see, these red countries right here are developing countries, but their poverty line is much higher, while in Brazil, which is a more developed country, the poverty rates aren't as high. From this, food insecurity can be directly tied to income and poverty. The more difficulty there is in paying for essentials, housing, transportation, food, medical care, the more difficult it is for people to purchase quality, nutritious foods, as these tend to be more expensive than cheap, unhealthy foods such as processed fast food. Programs exist in the world in order to lower rates of hunger and food insecurity, such as the World Food Program, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, and Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, WIC. The goal of SNAP is to provide low-income families with additional funds so that they can have more money to properly feed themselves in a healthier way to decrease the rate of malnutrition among the population. The goal of the WIC is similar, however they focus on pregnant women and women with young children. Despite these programs, many still struggle and resort to dietary styles that depend on fast food. This can lead to many health problems such as malnutrition, obesity, diabetes, etc. Venezuela and Bangladesh have been struggling with this crisis of lack of food for many years, and it seems it will never end. Both countries have poor economies, resulting in the government's lack of money for food. That is contributing to the scarce amount of food in these countries. Many riots have broken out all over Venezuela as the locals try to get a hold of the little food they can get. Riots usually consist of ransacking supermarkets, food truck deliveries, bakeries, and food carts. Due to these crimes, government officials are sending armed guards to protect the supermarkets of Venezuela from being taken over. Bangladesh has such a dense population that the government simply cannot compose a plan that will provide enough money for everyone living there. Also, one of the most common foods in Bangladesh is rice, since it's so cheap to produce, but it's not very nutritious and can cause malnutrition. However, there's been a major lack of rice production in Bangladesh due to the natural disasters that occur there. With food prices that are so inflated and a staple crop being halted in production, it's no wonder that the population resorts to crime for a meal. If parents are struggling to feed themselves, they will go to any length to make sure their children can survive. Food insecurity is a nationwide epidemic, mainly affecting Black and Hispanic families. In fact, food insecurity is most common in low-income households who live under the poverty line. In 2005, the average family income needed to support a four-person family was roughly $49,000, while higher income areas was around $106,000. However, in 2007, for the same average family size, it was only $48,000 for the average family and $71,000 for higher income families. As you can see, there's an obvious jump in income needed to raise a family between these 2 years. This causes families to think more about where each dollar goes, making each dinner count more and more each and every day. It is estimated currently that in order to raise a child for 17 years, it would cost about $234,000. But this doesn't include college. We can tack on hundreds and thousands of dollars more. Common factors that play a large role in how much money is spent in the family income is childcare, healthcare, and housing. Childcare is typically the biggest expense, sometimes above housing and healthcare. Not everyone can afford a nanny, but childcare gets much deeper than that. Every baby needs diapers, which can cost around $500 per year. And babies need hundreds of dollars of new clothes every couple months. All this money that goes into your children is money that is taken away from the food fund. Healthcare usually comes from an employer or a non-group plan. If you're able to get insurance from your employer, you can usually have more money to pay for your food. But if you're paying for it by yourself, insurance can get a little expensive. For housing, one family could have cable, internet services, and tenant-paid utilities. But one can make the argument that we really don't need cable TV or Wi-Fi in the house. They're just luxuries. But in reality, many people are starting to work from home, meaning if they didn't have Wi-Fi, they wouldn't actually be able to hold a job that gives the family money so they can buy their food. All these factors add up when trying to take care of a family and feed them with the nutrients they need, which often leads to food insecurities when money becomes a problem in the household. There are currently about 50 million Americans living with food insecurity. Fortunately, there are programs out there to help aid families. Food stamps is one of those programs available for families. When families suffer from food insecurities, there seems to be a decrease in health from inadequate nutrition. This can lead to chronic diseases such as obesity and diabetes. When people are struggling to keep food on the table, they become stressed. However, constantly being stressed out can lead to metabolic syndrome, a cluster of conditions that increase the risk of heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. When you're stressed out, you can also increase the risk of getting a potential visceral fat accumulation. Americans usually have poor diets when they live with food insecurity, and fast food restaurants usually have a dollar menu, making innutritious food cheaper and readily available. However, children who suffer from food insecurity often have a greater increase of health risks. Not only are they susceptible to the diseases mentioned above, They can also suffer from mental and physical health overall. Food insecurity is a problem that affects many people around the world. There are many factors that play into hunger and food insecurity, but it usually revolves around money one way or another. So remember how lucky you are the next time you get to spend $100 on groceries.